Folks, welcome back to Tabletop Tactics with myself, Lawrence the Spider, and Chef, also known as Mike, although I don't think I ever call him that. So,
yeah, like even like outside of this place.
No, I just call you Chef, yeah.
It's usually at that sort of tone and cadence as well.
And you are actually a chef, but not a real chef.
No.
But we're not going to talk about that today.
No.
Today we're talking about something very exciting. It's a brand new series coming to Tabletop Tactics. In fact, if you're watching this now on the day of release, this upcoming Saturday should be the first of these new shows. So you can check it out. Now, I'm going to caveat this before we get into these questions. I have a little set of questions here for Mr. Chef. But before we get into it, I'm going to caveat this by saying that this is not replacing normal battle reports.
Yes, it's really not.
That will be the absolute first comment. Why is this replacing a battle report? It's not. This is done in addition. For those of you which are familiar with the Tactica reports that we used to do, this is replacing the Tactica reports. So if you're on YouTube, you'll probably get this once every 3 weeks, maybe every 2 weeks. We'll be alternating. Where if you're on demand, you'll effectively get a league report every week. So the league reports, the first thing you need to know is they are replacing the Tactica reports.
So they are replacing a report, just not the normal...
No, but we're still going to be doing the normal battle reports.
Normal reports.
As per normal. And we're still going to be doing Crusade reports, which are being revamped and being done soon. But we'll talk about that separately. So first things first, I'm going to kick off with what the league report series is. Why is it?
And who is it?
And who is it? Then I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions because basically I came up with the idea and then I needed you to implement it, didn't I?
Yeah, this sounds very familiar. Very familiar.
So, in summary, the league reports are our competitive in-house league. Okay, a lot of you guys have been asking for this for a long time. The Tactica reports always used to be, competitive battle reports, but they would get a bit confused. Okay, because sometimes there would be a coaching element. You know, sometimes we'd talk through what we're thinking and what was going on, and then sometimes we wouldn't. And so it was kind of like, was it a coaching report? Was it just playing competitively?
What were they?
We weren't sure. I'm sure that you guys weren't 100% sure, but what did become apparent is there were lots of you which were really interested in seeing some of these nastier lists and, you know, having something to play for, you know, doing a tournament scenario. And a lot of you had asked about, could you do an in-house tournament? Could you do a league? Well, we were talking, weren't we? And we're like, we could do a tournament, but what if we had something ongoing? Yeah,
tournaments I think are fine as like sort of your one-offs because I mean it depends on how you do them. Of course, you could do a round robin style tournament where everyone obviously you play each other at least once and then you kind of do. At which point it's a ladder rather than more like a tournament. It's just most of the time those sorts of tournaments are day ladders. Or you do a knockout. At which point there's going to be like 3 games,
right? Because
there's only like 4 of us.
Yeah, it's finite.
You know, so it would literally you could just do like. Put these 2 random games together and that's a tournament. Doesn't really work with the numbers that we have.
Yeah.
An ongoing league, however, we came to the idea and the conclusion that was just a bit more of it's better for 1, for longevity, and 2, because there's a lot more that you can do with it.
There is. And so that brings me to the other thing which will tie in with the league is when you've got an ever-evolving meta, that way you can see our ever-evolving competitive lists. You know, things that we might suddenly have to change or a new codex comes out, this doesn't make my list as good in the league anymore, I'm going to have to tweak. And so what you'll see as well is because we're using the same list, or sometimes we might have to go back to the drawing board, which will also be interesting, right? But we'll be able to do separate shows, separate list analysis on our ongoing lists, discussing the competitive options that we can take. And you'll see us get really good with those individual lists and armies, right?
Maybe.
Yeah, but that's
all great in theory.
It's all great in theory, but one of the struggles that we have, I think, generally is that if you are, you know, playing every faction in 40k and we're constantly changing up the lists to make it as entertaining and interesting as possible for you guys, you sort of become a jack of all trades but a master of none.
Yes.
Whereas this will give us the opportunity to really master the factions because we're all picking certain factions and all of the factions will be represented.
Yeah. So we're going to split them in certain ways.
One might get swapped occasionally, but there'll be like an announcement whenever that happens.
Yeah. Yeah, I think just to sort of add on to that, because this is something that, you know, quite a lot of you guys do sort of say, and, you know, and it's always good to get people that have, you know, well, I play Space Wolves and that's all I play. Yeah. So you should do X, Y, and Z. Great. That sort of advice is probably better for the league reports, because your normal reports is going to be, I'm going to run the orcs today because I've got this really wacky idea for a list. Oh, what's the list? It's like nothing but buggies. I've got like Beard comes in and goes like, I'm going to run the demons today because I've never used the corn demons before, so I want to use them. So information like that is when we're sort of doing our, like, you know, normal rotation and just sort of trying stuff out. That's kind of not necessarily always going to be our normal battle reports, but that's where we'll sort of do those more experimental, you know, sort of like really crazy things like, I want to try this out, I want to try this out. The league will be where we go, right, okay, what about X, Y, and Z? Like, so that kind of feedback and proficiency is going to be where we kind of hone it. So you're not going to see, you know, myself going, I'm going to use the Death Guard for the very first time since their new codex has been out in a league report. I'm not going to do that.
No. It should be something we've already thought about. Like we've carved the list, we've crafted it to be vicious, right? You know, as if we were going to go to a tournament.
Yeah.
And because it's ongoing, and because now for the first time we'll have something to play for, because there's going to be a certain system in place which you guys can follow, it's going to be really exciting.
It is.
So with that in mind, I have a bunch of questions. You know what it is. You know why it is. I've got a bunch of questions for you, Mr. Chef.
It's a nice segue.
So we're going to take a little break and we'll be back in just a second. We're back, and it wasn't a very long break at all, but we are back with the questions. Mr. Chef.
That's me.
I've mentioned that there is in fact something to play for.
Yes.
Right? What does that mean?
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to have essentially a ranking system in place. So it's going to be, so predominantly I've got the 6 of us on here in-house. So that's myself, you, Bone, Beard, and I've also got Stig on there because Stig will be returned at time of filming in a few weeks, at time of release.
It'd probably be back at the time of release, I think.
Maybe.
If not very nearly.
Yeah, maybe nearly, so not quite a couple of weeks, but at time of release, probably a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So yeah, Stig will obviously be taking part in the league games. And I have put Sanger on there because he's like, you know, the sort of, you know, like on Street Fighter where you find like the joke character. But hey, this is the thing
like
with
Mortal Kombat.
Yeah.
The lizard, the green.
What, Reptile? No, Reptile.
Sorry.
No, Reptile was good. No, I'm thinking more
but
like,
he was a hidden character.
Yeah. So Sanger's like the hidden character, and this is the thing with hidden characters; they can either be like the joke character, but if you master, and this will be the exciting thing to see is to see the progression. And to that end, we've got a couple of things in place. So one of which is a ranking table. So, like I say, it's going to consist of the 6 of us to begin with.
Yeah.
More on that later.
Yeah.
And what it is, it's just a condensed version of the ELO ranking system. I won't go into details on it here, but they use it in chess, they use it in a lot of other board games, a lot of video games as well. I wanted to use something that was a little bit more robust. Yeah. It's called the Glyco 2 system, which is basically the same, but it accounts for more information. But I'm not a statistician, guys, so I couldn't get it to work, basically. So I went for something a bit simpler, and I've sort of toned it down because of the numbers that we're using. Normally you would start with like a base ranking of 1500. So, you know, your grandmasters of chess are like your 2,800 points. You know, we're talking big numbers. What I've done is I basically just slashed it into much more
manageable.
Not necessarily manageable, because the basic formulas are all the same and the basic rankings the same. But it's like, rather than, oh, you played a game and there's like 12 points, it's just you played a game and there's like 4 or 5 points. So it's just basically I've divided everything by 5, because it just looks neater. Yeah,
so in the theory goes, well, in fact, this is how it works. We're all given a base amount of points. And whenever we play, we can either gain points, which will then give us an overall ranking, or we can lose points, I'm assuming.
That's correct. But what you do is you wager those points, quote unquote. So what we've done is, based off of the last 4 months of games, just general games, not including Crusade, but including all of our old Tactica games and our general battle report games, as well as an in-house consensus that we've come to amongst the team. Everyone has a starting ranking of points. No one is the same ranking of points because there are different skill levels here. So someone like yourself, for example, you're starting at the highest level because you've
Oh, yeah.
And the general consensus is, and the stats that I've been doing in the background show that you are the better player out of the 6 of us.
Right.
And then we've all sort of come to that consensus, and it kind of goes down from there. So what happens is when, without going into the formula and the minutiae of it, essentially you wager points. If you defeat someone with a higher ranking than you, you steal more of their points.
Yeah, it's a bigger victory for you
because you've beaten someone that's better than you.
Yeah, and that makes sense, right?
And vice versa. If you beat someone who's lower in the ranking than you, you don't take as many of their points because you're supposed to. Yeah. So it's not necessarily. So the ELO ranking isn't necessarily like, oh, these are how many points you scored. It's an indication of your skill level. Which is essentially what it boils down to.
That's awesome.
So that's kind of
really cool.
That's the basics of it. That's the ranking. The ranking will be implemented from day one. And we'll sort of, we'll probably release that on the day of this, so that you can see our initial rankings, and then you can start it from day one with us, and then every league game you'll see those rankings change.
It will be a constant. It will be a living document.
Yes, it will be
on the
updated.
website. The link is in the description below.
Yes, and it'll probably appear below us here.
Yes, probably. But here's the exciting part. So you've got a ranking system.
Yep, it's nice and simple.
So we knew if it's an ongoing league, we want obviously some way to rank the players. But is that the only thing that we're going to be tracking?
Of course not.
Because wouldn't it be cool if we could, get to the minutiae of what happens if the person goes first?
Funny you should mention this, Lawrence.
Go on then.
So what I've also been recording, and again, this is stuff that I'm going to release sort of over the thing. So this might not necessarily be implemented day one, just because there's a lot of stuff going on, and I want to try and reduce the workload that I have to do without needing to type it out like 3 or 4 times, basically. Because I've already done it, I don't want to do it again. Is my fear.
You've actually got the statistics from January.
I do.
So Chef's actually been tracking games from January, even though they haven't been official league games.
No,
we are using them as the basis to kick off, because it makes sense.
They're forming the baseline, and I was doing it from, I think, August last year as well, so August 2020. But because it's only kind of like a third of the year, it didn't really. I mean, I know we're kind of using a quarter of the year here, but because it's all part of the same season. If anyone's interested in the last year's stats as well, I can release them. It's not an issue, but they're not as robust as this year's because this is like proper. But what I've been tracking is win rates, turn 1 win rates, your percentage chance of winning if you go first or second. So things like that.
Very interesting.
And I've been doing that for players and factions.
So we'll be tracking not just the ranking of the players and the percentages of, the likelihood that they'll win if they go first or second, etc. But we'll also have a ranking table for the factions being used.
Correct.
Which is really interesting, right? Now, obviously, I suppose you've got a higher skilled player using what would be considered a non-meta faction, or perhaps a faction with an older book, or a book which is known to not be doing that well competitively. You might see the faction doing perhaps better because it's being used by a skilled player.
So I've not quite yet figured a way of refining that. I mean, you could. The issue with stuff like that is then it becomes a bit. You start getting into like tier rankings and tier systems and things like that, which is fine, but so many of those are subjective.
Yeah, exactly.
We could quite easily turn around and say Drakari are the S tier army.
Yes.
Which is a fair enough statement. They're up there.
Yeah.
But we're still early doors in 9th edition, so those sorts of ranking systems would change. And because they're so subjective, so things like, take your Space Marines, for example. Yeah. Space Marines covers a huge number of options. I mean, you've got 100 data sheets, for goodness sake. One Space Marine army that is like, and this is the issue with tier systems, is when you go, Space Marines are A tier, they're really, really good. Yeah, I know, but are they if I'm running like nothing but infiltrators? And I've got this really themed force of, infiltrators and, and it's all Phobos and I'm running Raven Guard. Is that as strong as, 9 Eradicators and 12 Blade Guard? No, of course it's not. So you can't really do it based on like individual factions. So I've not quite figured out a way how to kind of modify stuff. So things like...
I'm not sure you need to though. I mean, thinking about it, because... One of the things is, it's going to be real tricky to truly judge like the faction tiering amongst such a small pool.
because
where
it's a
only
small
one
pool.
person's using that faction as well.
Yeah.
Like, it's not going to be truly representative of what an average of that faction does across the field, but it will be representative of what our own averages in-house are.
Yeah, and I think
Which I think will be enough.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing to kind of sort of establish here. This is not indicative of meta or, sort of things in general. Plenty of other places do that 10 times better than I will because that's their job.
That's what they do.
That's what they do. That's what they've trained. They've gone to uni to be statisticians. I've not. I studied psychology, so I've done some stats work, hence why you said, chef.
Yeah, I was like, chef, no, you'll be doing this.
Yeah, but I mean, we are talking like that was like 10 years ago. So it won't be super robust and it won't be indicative, but it will give an indication of our in-house skill level, and it will also provide an alternative because there is a difference between rankings across, 8 different tournaments, so for example, I sort of read, things and keep tabs and stuff. And at the moment, realistically, it's only Australia that are playing tournaments at the moment.
Yeah.
Because of...
That's right, yeah. Because of COVID,
Because of COVID.
Yeah.
But the Australian meta is so different to the European meta, to the North American meta. Yeah. I remember back in 8th edition, there were, because we've got many friends who play in many, many tournaments. And I remember one of them was getting very excited by this. I was chatting to him about it. He was getting very excited about this, sort of this new list that's doing the waves in like the North American tournaments. And then another one of my friends was like, yeah, Finland was doing that 4 months ago.
Yeah.
And then the Australians were just like, yeah, that wouldn't work here because our meta is so totally different. So this will just give an indication. It's certainly nothing,
It's a point of reference.
It's a point of reference.
That's it.
It's a different angle. It's a different aspect. And the reason why metas are different is because people play the game differently.
Yeah.
And because often these are all taken from tournament scores. You play 5-6 games in a tournament. You yourself, far more than I, will be able to tell the people at home what it's like, the difference between playing in a 6 to 7 game tournament to playing 1-2 games a week. Yeah. It's drastically different.
It's huge, yeah.
And the thing is, you can absolutely progress your skill level by playing tournaments. In fact, that's how many people do progress their skill level by playing in tournaments, because it's a completely fundamentally different way of playing the game. Yep. What this league will do and what these rankings will hopefully show is just our in-house progression and our in-house sort of comparisons.
Yeah. They will also set those of us which do play competitively into tournaments, set us up with our lists, having experimented with it longer. Because one of the things, because I used to play quite a lot of tournaments, and then I actually had a bunch of tournaments planned
last year.
COVID hit, and they were all cancelled. So I was going to hit the tournament scene hard again.
Yeah, I think you had like 4 or 5 booked or something.
4 booked. Yeah. So that was all, literally all of them were cancelled. But what I can do now is use all of the experience from the league reports, because I'll be playing more competitively more often, so that when I go to a tournament, I'm really well prepared for it as well, which is another bonus, because I like to go out and represent the channel and do all that jazz. But I was going to say one thing. So you've got your faction rankings.
Yep.
Okay. So, but it's within our own little bubble meta. Okay, that's fine. We're going to have our own individual rankings.
Yep.
Which is good. We're going to have further statistics on, like, what's the win rate of people who go first.
Yep.
All of that jazz. What else could we do to make it more balanced? Now, I know I know there's going to be a lot of people out there going, well, what happens if you put the best factions in the hands of, say, the best player? Or what happens when you put the best factions in the hands of, say, the worst player, just by our ranking? So, for example, if I were to only use new codexes, that probably wouldn't be that fair.
That would be skewed, and this is why. This is where it becomes that tricky balancing act, right? I've just mentioned about how tier systems are subjective and things like that. However, what we have decided in-house is that the split of armies is going to be fairly consistent. So I, for example, am going to be using Necrons. Yep. I'm also probably going to be using Gene Stealer Cults.
Right. And funny you should mention that, because I want to, and I don't think I've told you this, I want to use Tyranids.
Yeah.
Who are really struggling right now, okay?
Well, so they are and they aren't. They're actually
unless you're using 4
unless you're using like 3 Dimericons.
Which we don't have.
We don't own.
Right? So
if you want us to use 3 Dimericons in a list, give us an email and we will discuss you sending us some.
Do you know what's interesting? Just a bit, it's a slightly off tangent, but it is relevant. It's to do with the meta thing. It's one of the reasons as well. Because I lived in Australia for nearly 6 years actually. Even went to 2 tournaments. One was like an in-house Games Workshop tournament. So it was quite interesting over there. One of the reasons I found that the meta was quite different is because the hobby over there is very expensive as a baseline anyway. So that's already, you know, you've got to have a lot of surplus spare cash to even go into your local GW over there. But the Forge World stuff is horrifically expensive. Money-wise,
of course,
and it takes ages to arrive, all this jazz. And this is when I was living there. I don't know if it's changed now, because bear in mind that this was back in like 2007. But in my experience, you'd see a lot less of the good Forge World units, just simply because they're too expensive to buy. You know, if you were chasing the meta on Forge World, you'd want a big old bank account to go with it. So people were using more of the GW stuff, which then, you know, you're sort of cutting off part of the meta there.
Yeah, it kind of tweaks. Yeah. So, but that, I mean, that's
one of the. That's why sometimes it changes.
Yeah, that's why. I mean, there's lots of facets like that do make it very, very interesting.
Yeah. But back on topic.
Yes. So you know, so for example, Bone's going to be using the Death Guard.
Yep.
But he's also going to be using things like orcs, which again aren't terrible in the meta.
No,
they're not.
But they're not.
But they're not
great
to the 9th edition Codex levels.
No, they're not.
You know, so
Beard using Iron Warriors, and
Beard is going to use Iron Warriors, but he's also going to be using Dark Angels.
Right.
You know, so you know, there's that we're going to again. Despite not having like a tier system ranking, we are going to be dividing armies as fairly as we possibly can in terms of releases. And obviously, as new codexes come out, it can be reshuffled, right?
Yeah,
and it can be, you know, so I think it will all settle eventually.
Yeah, I agree.
But
it will make exciting games though, to an extent,
Yes.
because it means that if I'm rocking up with Tyranids, but I'm having to face Death Guard,
Yes.
okay, it's a very, very, very tough matchup
Yes.
for me to win.
Yeah.
You know, which means that you're going to see me lose. You know, you're going to see the better players. You know, not that I'm going to call myself a better player, but for perception-wise, you'll see the better skilled player lose because running an army was just really, really tough. You know, so we should get some interesting sways, twos and throws in this league.
We could in theory. We could, in theory, do like an in-house tier system based on our split of armies.
Yeah.
So this wouldn't be like, again, it's not representative of the overall meta, but let's say in that example, in-house, we all recognize that the Tyranids would be worse than the Death Guard on the basis of the fact that games that have been played with them, the faction abilities, the faction stats, new codex versus old codex. So we could apply like a modifier, we could apply a handicap. That's in the realms of the ranking system because I didn't touch upon it. When you get above or below a certain sort of tier in the ranking points, it does affect the points that you wager. So I think it's once you get above, so it's essentially in 3 tiers. You've got the tier 1, which is like 480 points. No one's on 480 points. No one's starting on 480 points, 420 points, whatever it was. No one's starting on that high of a level. But when you get to that sort of level, and bearing in mind that you would have needed to have taken points away from people, you actually gain even less points for winning, because you're in the tier above. Everyone's starting on like a baseline amount. If you go below a certain level, you'll take more points if you win, and you'll give away less points if you lose. So it's, even though like the ranking system shouldn't be looked at in too much depth in terms of points because we're such a small pool of players. The reason why it works really, really nicely with things like chess is because you've got your grandmasters on like 2,892 points. The one below them is 2,890 points. 2,879 points. You know, so but at that sort of level, they'll beat each other and go up by like half a point. They'll beat someone that they could play someone that's on like 2,000 points and gain 0.02 points. It's meaningless because it's such a deficit in skill at that.
That's a good way of doing it.
But we're also talking hundreds of thousands of players.
Yes, exactly. You know? So the pool is so vast that, you know.
So so that's why we've kind of modified it slightly. But yeah, I mean, let me know, you know, if I sort of mentioned it before in a previous one where me and Beard have spoken about like the league and sort of ranking and sort of pools like that. You know, if anyone has any other ideas, feel free to drop me an email. Yeah. And you know, sort of if you've got any suggestions or if you've got an implementation that would work nicely, yeah. Or sort of, you know, like a modification that you've seen or that you use,
yeah.
let me know, because the whole point of this is it's going to be 100% living. We're going to update this, improve it, add to it over time.
Yeah.
So what you see on day one on this day's release, if you're coming back and watching this in 4 months' time, it could be totally different.
Yeah, it could be different, but we still want those sort of core things to track.
Yes.
So, you know, we'll try and make sure that we keep all those things.
But that is something that we can look at implementing perhaps at a later date, is a handicap system for worse armies or better armies.
Yeah, we could. But, you know, I think at launch is if we've got a nice mix of in the army pool.
Yeah.
And also you can't just keep using, like I can't just go, right, I'm going to use Drakari, and my next league game I'm going to use Drakari, and my next, you know, you've got to alternate. Yeah. So, you know, so each faction is fairly represented in the hands of that player.
Because we want to make sure that the rotation is sort of there. Yeah. So, I mean, looking at the stats for sort of the January to April where I've been recording it, I mean, over the course of all Space Marine factions, they've been played like 18 times.
Yeah.
Genius Leader Cups haven't been used once.
Yeah.
Reason being is because it frazzles Bone's brain. You don't play very often.
No.
Beard is uncomfortable using them because there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
And I don't want to use them because we don't have the models to run them effectively in a competitive sense compared to what's happening in the meta. So it's just kind of picking the opponent for them is actually very difficult, because the minute that you go, oh yeah, I'll bring, you know, I want to use Death Guard. It's almost a non-game at that stage. So, you know, it's stuff like that. But with the league, that's why we want to rotate it, because we don't want to see that imbalance between the factions.
Correct. And then on top of that, because we'll be using all of the factions competitively, that incentivizes Mr. Sanger in the background. We'll be saying, we need this unit. Okay? We need this unit. So things which you might be missing for Gene Sealer Cult, we'll bring to the front of the queue just to zhuzh them up. And it also cool for you guys, because you'll get to see whatever army it is that you're playing, you'll see us, you know, forging that army competitively as well.
Yeah.
And then we'll do shows, list analysis, as I've said, talking about our lists as they evolve. Okay, so great. So we know how the stat system's going to work, spoken about that. And if it still doesn't make sense, you'll see it in a nice pretty table in the link below, so you can just look at the results. You don't need to work out the math. But what's next? What would you like to see in the future in regards to the league? Is there anything that you would like to add on to this now, or do you feel that we've got the base formula and we can just roll with that?
Well, I mean, we've got the base stuff, so that's great. I would love to get a bit more detail, and I'd love to refine the sort of the formula and the ranking system as we go and we get a bit more experience with it. Sure. So, you know, again, it's a living thing. Yeah. One thing that I did see someone mention in the comments, I think it was on demand, forgive me, I cannot remember who it was that left the comment, but they said it would be really interesting to see victory point differences. And I think that's a really cool idea.
Yeah. So the margin of victory.
Exactly. Yeah. And that won't necessarily affect your win or your points or stuff like that. Although I had considered that in some way for when we were talking about tournaments many years ago. It may yet come back. Who knows? You'll have to keep watching this space.
Yeah, it's on the agenda.
But yeah, it's on the agenda whenever. Yeah. But yeah, so it wouldn't affect like rankings, but it would just be an interesting stat to look at. Yeah. So to give you an example, let's say me and you played.
Yeah.
And on, you know, month 1 of the season, you win on average by 20 victory points over me. Mm-hmm. But by month 6, that gap of margin has gone down from 20 to 8
so either
on average.
I'm getting worse or you're getting better.
Well, yeah, and that's the kind of comparison sort of stuff that we can use to make and extrapolate the data and things like that. So you can go, right, well, when Bone and Beard play, there's only like 3 points between it.
Yeah.
But when they use this faction versus that faction, actually it's a whitewash. You know, it's like a 50-point victory point difference. Yeah. And you can kind of use it, and then it will be one of those things where it won't start out all that strong, but as the games progress, you'll sort of see that progression, and you'll see. Cool. You know, ideally what you want to see is you want to see like a line, you want to see everyone on lines on a line graph and they sort of do this. Yeah. That's what you want to see.
Yeah.
And again, that's the sort of thing that we can use to extrapolate both skill level, faction strength, as well as our own in-house abilities. You know, if suddenly this starts happening. Oh, well, why is that? Oh, well, why is Beard suddenly shot up like that?
Yeah.
Oh, the Sisters book came out.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
No one's got an answer for them yet.
Well, why is suddenly this happened? Oh, because that's a perfect. This codex has come out and they've got the perfect counter for Death Guard.
Yep.
And that's the sort of thing that we can and that's again we can do more shows. And a lot of it will just be interpreting data, which is always fun to do.
Yeah.
Sort of depending on how you're feeling. And it would just give us a lot more stuff to work with. That's one idea.
Okay.
Shamelessly stolen from one of our bosses in the community.
Yeah.
The other one, which I like, which you came up with, is challenges.
Yes.
So why don't you talk about your idea?
I thought, because when COVID goes away, we will, invite guests back on. Mm-hmm. And I've said this, we actually had started to do it. And I know a very popular game was when I had Vic come on to do
young Vic.
The sort of unofficial final.
That was the seventh. Was that the seventh
GT.
match or the eighth?
Yeah,
match
it would have been it would have been the sixth match.
The sixth match.
Because we only played 5 games.
That was
right.
It, yeah.
And that was really popular. And we've had other guests come on, and they've all been bosses, and they've been. It's always good fun to see, how different other people play, and not just watch us all the time. If we could have challengers come in to represent you guys, the community. So every win that they get would also go on as on the ranking table as, I don't know if we would call them you guys the community or the challengers or, whatever. But basically you become this extra player.
The 7th player.
And any new challenger can come in.
Yeah.
You represent your club and you get a win for the community against Tabletop Tactics.
Yeah. So not only do you get bragging rights, but you get to add your stats to the ongoing rankings. So you wouldn't be, because of the way that the ranking system works, it wouldn't be like an individual, you come in, you get your name put onto the ranking board, because then you're not playing as often as we are.
No.
Not
so
within the ring.
The community.
Yes. So it would be, you come in, and that's where you can get some really really fun stuff. You go, right, well, we're approaching the end of August or whenever. Or we're in October, and if the next challenger that comes in wins their game, they'll get enough ranking points to put them into 2nd place. Ooh, and now you're starting to power up, right? No pressure on the challenger, So you could get some really exciting stuff, and because that adds, it will add a bit more stakes to the games. I mean, we're all friends here, guys. We're not doing this for thousands of pounds in prize money because, can you imagine if you put our bonuses on the line? It's just like your salary, you must earn your wage.
Do you imagine? But now it's funny you mentioned that.
I'm about to flip this table.
What if, let's take it a step further, and at the end of every season, we'll determine the season by a year, right? So
I think a season, season by year, but we would still do like monthly.
There is something to win, like a belt,
championship belt, Grotty's face on it.
Yeah, could you imagine? Why not? So, and then in theory, I don't know how it would work yet for if the community win. Maybe it would go to the person that had the biggest margin of victory against one of us, or I don't know, or maybe you would invite them in for a final.
This table's about to be flipped.
But then potentially, what if you guys could win the belt? And then that becomes super exciting, I think. So there's a little insight into the future. I don't think we should say any more.
There's a lot going on.
Yeah. But there will be something to play for, some sort of epic trophy. Basically, I am looking into how to get a belt made.
You can get custom wrestling belts made, championship belts.
I know. This is UFC stuff. Anyway, that's the future. So we've pretty much discussed the league now.
Yeah, I think so.
We know why it's happening. We know what it is. You guys are going to see the first game this Saturday. What I would like to leave it on is, what would you guys like to see added? Do you have any other ideas? As Chef's already mentioned, if you come up with a better way of doing the ranking system in the long run, we can certainly look at implementing that. But I think right now we've got a lot of exciting opportunity. The league's already started. We've already been filming league reports as of you guys watching this.
Yes.
And it's a lot of fun. It's going to be great for those of you which are really interested in competitive play anyway. And even if you're not and you just want some really good tips with your faction, just, you know, just because you want to see how it works at a higher end, if you like, you can just check out that series. But what would you like to see? Leave a comment down below. Let us know if you have any ideas in the league report. How would the challenges work?
Yep.
You know, what would you envision it being like? You know, winning that championship belt. It'd be so cool. And that's it. It's a brand new series.
Yeah, it's very exciting to see how it's going to sort of like evolve.
Yeah.
You know, over in the long run, and sort of how new codexes are going to impact it, how our skill levels are going to change, how our army sort of approach is going to change. Right. You know, as well as when the world opens up again. This is great practice for us if we want to go to tournaments, go to events, and meet you guys. Yep. You know, because that's one of my favorite things to do in the hobby is just go to events and, you know, play some games with brand new people and just meet new people. It's great.
Like, I mean, like Warhammer World's a classic example of that. So one thing that I will end on is, because we are replacing the tactical reports and effectively any element of coaching that came with those tactical reports, although it didn't happen every time, what does that mean for things like coaching? Because I know that there are quite a few of you out there as well which did enjoy the coaching. I've already got a plan for that. There is an all new tutorial series coming, and with that, things like Sacred and Dragon will be updated for 9th. And I will be doing all of the coaching within those new tutorial shows. So we've got that covered too, but they're going to live in a very specific place where you know that you're going to get coaching in that.
A little box.
Yeah. So like I might even
Shelf.
do like a coaching report.
Yeah.
You know, but that will not be a league report. And that way it's not going to be confusing anymore.
Yeah. You won't have the
you know, and that way when we play these league reports, we can just play competitively and we don't have to, you know, coach as we're going along. But you'll probably get a natural, coaching will be a byproduct because you'll just be watching and learning as we play.
Yeah. I mean, I think we probably would explain thought processes from time to time.
Oh, yeah.
Because there will be times where someone goes, why?
Yeah.
And there will be times where I look at myself after a move I've just gone and gone,
yeah.
Why?
But it'll be like after the fact,
yes,
rather than telegraphing it to the opponent.
Yeah, because the whole point is then your opponent goes, okay then.
So I'm going to make sure you can't do that. Well, look, Chef, always a pleasure.
Yeah.
We've gone through the league report series today. I hope you guys are looking forward to it. We're looking forward to showing you it. And as with everything at Tabletop Tactics, whilst we will be playing competitively, we won't be playing seriously. There's going to be a lot of fun in this series, especially when you got things like
Beard. He's already told me his plans.
Maybe the mysterious El Beardo will come in as a challenge.
I'm not sure if I can handle that.
Who knows?
I'm not sure if I need that in my life.
So, on that note, thank you for being bosses. Thanks for the support. If you like us, give us a like and subscribe. And if you really like us, go check out On Demand over on our website, www.tabletoptactics.tv. So until next time, I've been Lawrence, this has been the Chef, and we'll see you soon.
Bye! We're going to get a championship belt.
I'm going to get something, 100%. A belt would be awesome. It'd just be cool, yeah. Play for the belt.